So this question is a starred question, so it's looking for lots of explanations, and we're seeing a frequency polygon here. We know it's a frequency polygon because it's a straight-sided line graph, polygons straight sides, and frequency polygon. So we've got to kind of remember how this kind of diagram works, and basically you've got to realise that it's about groups data. So a frequency polygon is drawn for group data. We can see by the way the numbers are worded here that the groups are going to go between something here and something here, and we get the clue from the way the table has been given in the question as well. They're telling us that the number of CDs sold each day were between these groups. So if we take this group here, then we can see that that's somewhere between 30 and 40. Well, when we look at the way the table is, they're telling us that 31 to 40 had a frequency of 13 for this particular shot. So the graph here is, this point here is between 31 and 40. They plotted it in the middle of the group. So we've got to basically look what the question wants us to do with this information. So they want to compare the sales. So there's the trigger. We want to compare. And when you want to compare, so we want to compare the sales of the CDs. So when you want to compare on frequency polygon type questions, then we're comparing the modal class interval because it's about group data, and we're going to compare the spread in some way. Typically that'll be the range or somehow how the data's spread out. So they want us to compare. We've already drawn one graph. So Kevin's shop in the high street, they want to compare. Kevin's information about the sales in the high street is shown on the grid. So this is about Kevin. So again, it's important we kind of highlight and label so we know what we're talking about because it's a compare question. And Joe's information has been given in the table. So we can do this in two ways. We can try and take the information here and write it against here, so that we can then look at the numbers and compare like with like, or we could plot the graph and then compare the graphs. So either way would work. I'm going to plot the graph because it kind of helps me to remember how to draw frequency polygons. So this 10 is for the first group, so the halfway point between this group is 5, so they've already kind of given us a clue of where you're plotting it. So it's going to be above here, but it's going to start at 10. The next one goes to 34. So again, look where it's between 11 and 20. So look where they've got their value, and then you're going to put 34 on there. So look at the scale. It's really important we work out scales of graph. And so when we look at this graph, we can see that it's going up in twos. So 34 is going to be 20, 30, 2, 4. 21 to 30 is going to 24. So again, we can see that 21 to 30 is being plotted above this point here, halfway between 21 and 30. And they want us to go to 24. Then we've got 31 to 40 is 13. So that's going to be 13. And 41 to 50 is 7, so 41 to 50 is 7. Again, you want to be halfway between 41 and 50. And 51 to 60 is going to be 12, so 51 to 60 is going to be 12, so it's going to be there. Again, it's about a frequency polygon, so we should get our ruler and connect that together. So straight lines. Okay, so we've plotted the two graphs. Again, always label your graphs. So this was Joe. So we can then look at the graphs and finish off with a comparison because the question says compare them. So we can see that the modal class intervals were totally different. The modal class interval for Joe was down in this region here, so that was between the 11 to 20 region. So Joe had a modal class interval of 11 to 20, which was lower than Kevin's at 31 to 40 CDs sold per day. So that's one measure of comparison. We've compared the modal class interval, and so Joe has mostly sold less per day than what Kevin did. Joe's modal average is lower. But when we look at the range of the data, in other words how spread out it is, then we can see that they both had similar ranges, as in the same range. It went across the same spread. So we had one comparison about the modal interval, and then we should be saying then something along the lines of the ranges, so the range of CDs sold by both shops was the same. So that would be enough to get you full marks. Nothing fancy, just making sure we're clear. We've drawn the frequency polygons to compare them on the same graph. We recognise that to plot the frequency polygons we use the middle of the groups and then plot the frequencies for each of those, join them up with straight lines. And then we've recognised the key thing about frequency polygon comparisons is to talk about the modal class interval. We can see that Joe's modal class interval was lower than Kevin's, which means that on most days Joe sold less than what Kevin did, but the range of the number of CDs sold was the same. So that's how we could do a comparison question using frequency polygons.